Hello and welcome back to Creative Leadership for Pastors podcast. I am your host, Benjamin Oladapo Aregbesola, and today we will explore a powerful example of innovation in ministry, the Apostle Paul. Paul was a true trailblazer. His creative approach to spreading the gospel changed the course of history. So as pastors and church leaders, we have so much to learn from his adapting, from his innovating, from thriving in ministry. If you are ready for some fresh ideas, why don't you just grab a cup of juice? Why don't you settle in and let's get inspired by Paul's journey? Paul wasn't afraid to try something new. From the instant he met Christ on the road to Damascus, his life underwent a dramatic transformation. Can you imagine this? A man who was once a persecutor of Christians suddenly became the greatest missionary in Christian history. So it's a powerful example of how God can use anyone for His glory when they are willing to step out in faith, when they are willing to innovate. So take a moment to think about your ministry. Have you ever been faced with a moment where you knew you needed to do something radically different to reach your congregation? So just like Paul, we are called to be adaptable and willing to embrace new ways of serving the Lord. I recalled a pastor who realized that his church wasn't growing as much as he has hoped it to be. We are all used to the traditional methods where we just organize church within the four walls of a building. He saw that this was just not working for his community. And so what did he do? He took his services to the local park. Imagine that. A full outdoor service, church service outdoors, in the middle of everyday life. The impact was incredible. People who had never considered stepping into a church suddenly found themselves hearing the gospel in a relaxed, approachable setting. It reminded me so much of Paul. Meeting people where they are. Apostle Paul chose to go to where the people are. And just as Paul did in his missionary journey, we also can take the gospel to where the people are, meeting them where they find comfortable for themselves. That brings us to our first key lesson from Paul: cultural adaptability. Paul was a master of adapting his message to the culture of the people he was reaching. To the Romans, he behaved like a Roman. To the Jews, he is a Jew. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 12, Paul says, "I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some." Isn't that incredible? He just adapted, he adjusted to the culture of the people that he finds himself, wherever he finds himself. See, Paul's ability to navigate different cultural landscapes without compromising the gospel is something we as pastors must embrace. Wherever you find yourself, there's something that is unique to the environment you find yourself. Why don't you use that as a basis, as a launching pad for you to share the gospel? You don't have to compromise your message, but you can certainly change your method to reach more people. So visualize what that might look like today. Perhaps streaming your sermons online, hosting online question and answers, or even collaborating with community organizations. So whichever method you think is possible for you, why don't you adapt it and see that growth that you're expecting in your ministry? Now, another innovation Paul leveraged was the technology of the time. You wonder, there was no phone, there was no tablet, there was no internet during his time. But his epistles were just like the ancient social media. He wrote letters. Those letters that he sent to the early churches, He used it to spread his teaching far and wide. Apostle Paul is believed to have written 2/3 of the New Testament. He couldn't physically be everywhere, but through his writings, Paul stayed connected to his followers. It is not different today. Think about how we can use social media, podcasts like this ones, or live stream to reach people beyond our immediate circle. Thank God for the COVID period. Most of us went online because we couldn't gather physically, and instead of we not gathering physically and losing members and losing connection, we went online and started streaming. So when Paul wrote to the Colossians, he said, "I, Paul, write this greeting in my hand. Remember my chain." That's in Colossians chapter 4 verse 18. So he added personal touches, reminding us of how to the power of authenticity, of being authentic, that personal connection. Even in our own digital communication, you need to still have that personal connection with the people that you are trying to reach out to. Pastors, are you staying connected with your congregation beyond the pulpit? It is not enough for us to just stand on the pulpit and dish out the messages, but it's also good for us to stay connected with them. Let's take a page from Apostle Paul, literally, and connect with our congregation. I recently connected with a pastor who had a very brilliant idea. So instead of only preaching on Sundays, he created short daily videos. These are just a minute, 2 minute, 3 minute clips with simple scriptural encouragement for his congregation. You know what? His reach exploded. People shared the content with friends and families, and soon he was reaching a whole new audience. So much more like Apostle Paul. He was not able to be there physically, but he was able to reach a large congregation, a larger audience than his immediate congregation could afford. So let us also do leverage on the technology of the time and reach out to as many that we can reach out to. Another powerful lesson from Paul is the value of partnership and collaboration. Partnership and collaboration. Of course, Paul never walked alone. He partnered with Barnabas, he partnered with Timothy, he partnered with Silas. He was always building a team of leaders who shared his vision, who shared his mission. Philippians chapter 1 verse 3 to 5 says, "I thank God for every time I remember you because of your partnership in the gospel." It's a beautiful reminder that ministry is never a solo journey. Some of us want to run alone. It is not for your advantage. If care is not taken, you will burn out and there will be nobody to help you. Remember, two are better than one. When one falls, the other one raises it up. So how can we apply this today? By partnering with other churches, ministries, community leaders, we can achieve a greater impact than we could do individually. The gospel is not an individualistic thing. It involves everyone that you can connect with. And so consider establishing collaboration to address local challenges. You can have youth outreaches, you can have food sharing, you can have local markets, sharing of used items, and so with this together we can enhance our effectiveness. Well, there are so much lessons we can learn from Paul. Paul was also innovative in his approach to discipleship. He didn't just preach and move on. He built leaders. People like Timothy, people like Titus. Paul made sure that his work will continue by mentoring others. Do you mentor others? As leaders, do you have a succession plan? Mentoring others means you groom them up so that after you have gone, long after you have gone, you've passed the baton on to them, and they can continue with the race. In 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 2, Paul says, "And what you have heard from me, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." Imagine how powerful it is to invest in young leaders in your church, equipping them to take the message of Christ further than you ever could alone. You are equipping them, you are mentoring them, you are training them, you are bringing them up so that they can take the message even further than you alone can do it. If you are watching this as a video podcast, maybe on YouTube, you can picture scenes of Paul's journey, ship on the sea, maps with arrows marking his route, and his hand passing letters symbolizing his epistles. So these visuals remind us of the length that Paul went to spread the gospel, and how we can also can also push the boundaries in our ministries. That's how I'll wrap it up. Paul's ministry shows us that innovation is key for effective leadership. Whether it's adapting to the culture or the people you find yourself within them, or using technology, or partnering with others, or discipling the next generation, there is endless possibility to innovate in our ministries today. So as you reflect on this, ask yourself, how can I innovate to better serve God's people? It's a question I want you to find time to answer. And before we go, let's do me a quick favor. If you found today's episode helpful, kindly share it with fellow leaders or pastors. Let's continue to spread these insights and inspire innovation in ministry together. You are free to connect with me on social media for additional creative leadership insights. Thank you for tuning in to Creative Leadership for Pastors podcast. I am Benjamin Oladapo Aregbesola, and I'm encouraging you to remain creative, to remain adaptable and purposeful in your leadership. So kindly don't forget to subscribe, to share, and follow Benjamin Oladapo Aregbesola on social media for more insights on creative leadership. Thank you, and see you next week.